to Death and Aliens, an in-depth look at horror and sci-fi TV from two friends who vaguely know what they're doing. I'm Courtney.
And I'm MK.
And how are ya?
You know, I'm okay. It's our this is Courtney and I, our first recording post Halloween. Um, and this year was my first Halloween in my new house. Um, so I like stayed home and handed out candy for trick-or-treaters, and it was really cute. And we had no idea how many trick-or-treaters we were gonna have. So we did overbuy candy, but like actually not by too much. I'm like actually impressed with how little is left. And we only bought candy that we would then eat in
Right,
case
which
in
is
case
the
that
only way to do it,
happened.
really.
Yeah. But it was funny because I finally installed my Ring doorbell and like got it all set up so that I could hear when the trick-or-treaters were coming. But now I've become obsessed with it, and like every time there's
Sure.
motion at my door because I'm never there, I like open it, and sometimes I open it just to talk to Dan when he's on the porch, which is funny because until yesterday he didn't know that that was something you could do. Until yesterday I opened it and I go, "What are you doing?" And he was like,
Poor Dan.
I
You're
swear,
gonna give him a heart attack.
one day he's gonna kill me. One day he's just gonna be so sick of my shit. So
Uh-huh.
sick of my shit. But yeah, so I'm just trying to not think about the fact that it's already November and I am like so far behind in my work. But other than that, like I'm doing pretty well.
Excellent, excellent.
How about you?
Well, since it is post-Halloween and I haven't talked to you for most of October, it seems, I'm going to tell you about all of my Halloween shenanigans that I've been on this month. There's only three. It's not a lot. It sounds like a lot more before I start talking. I started the season by I went to my aunt's house and I watched all of the Insidious films, all of them. And
That
I
sounds
don't
like
know if
a
you recall
terrible idea.
all of the times I've talked about that's the scariest movie I've ever seen. I'm never going to finish it because in college
Yeah,
I tried to watch it and I couldn't. And I was like, I'm never watching this. We sat
yeah.
down and watched all of them, and they're actually really well done. And I can't remember if James Wan is a problem or not, but I really like him as a director, and so I really hope he's not. Because those were excellent. He also did the Conjuring film, so I watched the first Conjuring movie with our girl Vera Farmiga. Um,
Yeah.
it was okay,
Okay.
huh?
I said
Yeah.
nice, but
So I want to finish that series too next, but coming off of like Insidious, it was a little little low key. And then I he also has a new show called Teacup that he is directing, and it's on Peacock, I think.
okay.
Pretty creepy. It's about a family or a little town area, farm area, where everyone has been drawn into a line. If you step out of the line, you immediately like disintegrate. And
Oh,
that just like came about one night. That is all I know about it. I do not actually know why or what has happened yet because I haven't watched it in 3 weeks. But all James Wan, so I've become a fan this year, which is new for me. So that was my new director dive.
okay.
I also went to a haunted house or a horror house. I don't know what to call it. It used to be House of Shock here in New Orleans, and I don't know what it's called now because people still call it House of Shock. That is not what it's called anymore.
Oh,
Um, but I went with my friend Kirsten and Vicky, and then Kirsten's friend Amy. And so it was a nice little girls' night, and we got like the secret bar package. And so you had two different, like, they directed you into like these secret bars throughout the like big maze, and you got like a shot of like the what is it called? Old Smoky Distillery moonshine.
okay.
And it was so tasty. It was so much fun. It was like an hour and a half, which was longer than I anticipated, but what I wanted to put my money towards because I was like, this
Yeah.
is it was like $30. It wasn't like millions of dollars, but I was like, this is kind of expensive to just go through for like 10 minutes. But then we were there for quite a while, so it worked out. Um, and last but not least, as you mentioned, it is post Halloween by like 3 days.
Yeah.
So Nick's mom did like an alien theme in her yard.
Okay.
And so she has like cows being abducted, and so she dressed as an alien for Halloween, and then we dressed as the Men in Black. And so it was very cute. I'll probably post pictures if I remember. I may have already posted pictures by the time you hear this, because my plan is to post next Thursday, which is before this comes out, or the
Got
day this
it.
comes out. I'm not really sure.
No, this doesn't come out until the 14th of November.
Excellent. So maybe you'll see those before this comes out. But because I am in Louisiana, I got eaten alive by mosquitoes, and I've never been more itchy in my life.
Good.
I counted my left thigh, which I have thick thighs, I understand. I had 23 bites just on my thigh of my left leg.
Oh,
That doesn't count for the 15 that I counted on my left foot. They're also on my right thigh and my right foot and my arms.
that's horrible. Also, I just
And-
Googled, is James Wan problematic? And I cannot find anything. So,
Oh, that is great news. Great news for me. Then I will finish the Conjuring series. But yeah, so I am living in a very itchy hell right now. And it doesn't seem to matter what I do. I've taken a lot of different allergy meds. I have used a lot of different creams and gels, and nothing helps. So I'm just gonna push through until I die. So I am carrying Halloween with me for the rest of my life, it seems, but it was really nice leading up to that. So it was a pretty successful October month. So pleased about that. So while I'm living in this awful itchiness, can you give me a little spiritual guidance?
Sure. It's just funny because you're talking about being in pain, really. And the quote says, pain. You just have to ride it out. Hope it goes away on its own. Hope the wound that caused it heals. There are no solutions, no easy answers. You just breathe deep and wait for it to subside. Most of the time, pain can be managed, but sometimes the pain gets you when you least expect it. Hits way below the belt and doesn't let up. Pain. You just have to fight through, because the truth is, you can't outrun it, and life always makes more.
That's true. I don't know that that was enlightening, or uplifting.
No, I don't.
It was just life's gonna punch you in the face, but it's also gonna do it again.
Yeah,
So it is what it is.
correct.
Excellent, excellent. Well, today is gonna be an interesting episode, and I hope it goes well. We are we are on our movie break, our movie time in between seasons. And today we are going to talk about Manhunter and Red Dragon because they are the same. So we're covering them in one episode. We're
Which
gonna,
I knew before we talked about this that they were based on the same book. I didn't realize how similar they were, and I'm so glad we're doing them at once because I don't know if I could do 2 episodes of
no.
Yeah.
I knew they were gonna have the same storyline. I didn't know how similar it was gonna be done, but I did know they were the same storyline. So I was like, there's no way we could talk about this in 2 separate episodes.
Right.
So I'm gonna give you a little intro to both of them before we get into our discussion, and we'll do some deeper dives into the characters, some deeper dives into the storylines, and go from there.
All right.
So you know what you're here for, and stay here. It's gonna be fun, I'm sure. So the first one that we watched, we started with Manhunter because it came out first. It is the first movie to be made based off of Thomas Harris's book series. It came out August 15th of 1986, and it was rated 7.2 out of 10. I did not do a lot of our day of stuff just because
we have 2 days. Yeah.
Yeah. So that one came out in the 80s, which is clear if you watched it. No question. And then we have Red Dragon, which came out October 4th of 2002. So we are, oh my gosh.
Really?
Math me.
2002. I didn't realize. I thought it was earlier than that.
It was because Silence of the Lambs was 91.
Yeah.
And then 0203 were Red Dragon and Hannibal.
Okay.
So it came out 18 years later, 16 years later, 86 to 02.
Yeah.
And then this one was also rated 7.2 out of 10. So these are very different movies, and we will talk about it at the end, but I feel like they should be different ratings, but they also came out at very different times. So
Yeah.
you got to look at your audience. So one of the places I wanted to kind of start is by comparing some of the characters we've seen. So the overarching storyline that we get comes directly from the book. It is the storyline of the Tooth Fairy, known as Dollar. What's his name? Dollarhide.
Yeah.
I don't know his first name.
Dollarhide. Yeah. Mr. D.
Mr. D. And he is, he's started to kill people, as you are used to. He's a big fan of Hannibal. Hannibal is already in jail at this point in time. So this happens, post what we've seen in the Hannibal series. But he's trying to kind of like honor Hannibal in a way. But it's also clear that he's got some mental issues going on.
Yeah.
And the Red Dragon comes from a William Blake poem that he's created this whole idea in his head about. But we do, other than the Tooth Fairy, we do have a lot of the same characters from the book, from the TV show. So we're going to focus on the core four. So of course we have Will Graham. This is the first movie. Manhunter's the first movie anyone's seen him in. And so if you've only watched Silence of the Lambs, I don't even know if he's mentioned in that one. He may have left by then. I don't remember him being in that one when I watched it, but it's been like 15 years.
Right.
But this is his big story, is Red Dragon. So you have Will Graham, and in Manhunter, he's played by William Peterson. If you did not recognize William Peterson,
I did. I did. I was watching him and I was like, who the fuck is that? After about an hour of this movie, which was too long, but we'll talk about that. After about an hour of this movie, I finally gave up and looked him up because I could not handle the fact that I knew him. And then I almost texted you and was like, Gil fucking Grissom is Will Graham?
Yeah.
Bitch, what?
And this is pre-Gil Grissom. So, because he was Gil Grissom 01 or 02.
Yeah.
Is when he started. But
yeah, because he was young in this movie compared to Gil Grissom. Ooh.
Yeah. So obviously he is known for CSI, To Live and Die in LA, and Fear, which is a movie I've never seen that I have always kind of just had on my list. I want to see Fear. I have a few fun facts about him. This particular character was so draining for him that as soon as the movie ended, he cut his hair and dyed it because he wanted to separate himself so much from this character after playing it, which it is a weird mental character to play, but I feel like he did a lot more mental stuff in CSI, so maybe he got tougher skin by the time he got to CSI.
I mean, yeah, because that was like 15 years later.
Yeah. And so him and Tom Noonan have also been together on CSI because Tom Noonan, who plays Francis Dollarhide, also played a serial killer on CSI at some point. And he was so involved in regular CSI that by the time CSI Miami came out, he was kind of done with it, and he completely refused to produce CSI Miami, which is why it sucks. I'm
just gonna go out on a limb and say that is not why it sucks. Why it sucks is because the guy who plays Horatio Caine can't act.
Yeah, it's a rough out of all of the spinoffs.
So David Caruso cannot act. In fact, David Caruso was originally supposed to be the main character, the star in a 90s cop show called NYPD Blue. And he was so bad that his character does not exist past season 1.
I was wondering where I knew his name from past that.
Even though it was written for him. They said, you know what? How about we just go in a different direction?
Hasn't he been in something else recently though?
Probably, and it probably didn't last. That didn't last either, probably.
God, he looks rough.
I mean, I don't like to be super judgy, but like I've never seen him do well in anything.
No. I don't know. I hope he's okay as a person. But yeah, no, that truly is the worst CSI
hmm
rendition. Um, and so that's our Will Graham for Manhunter. So
He hasn't done anything since he left CSI.
that's probably for the best.
Right, but like neither film nor movies. He has literally not acted since CSI ended.
Yeah, bless his heart. Um, so our next Will Graham is Edward Norton, who is known for Fight Club, American History, Primal Fear, and Birdman.
That was a more upsetting casting to me than Gil Grissom.
Yeah, I have feelings. We'll get to that. I'm gonna give you some trivia on him and then we'll
Okay.
compare the characters.
Okay.
So he was actually meant to be Private Ryan and Saving Private Ryan and turned down the role.
Thank God, because that would have been terrible if he was in it.
Yeah. He also turned down the role of Bruce Banner in the 2003 Hulk, but then came back and was the 2008 Hulk. And I have to say, I don't remember that being the worst one. I think I didn't like 2003 more.
So 2003 was terrible because it was made like a comic book panel and there was like
Yeah.
weird pop-ups on the screen and like Eric Bana probably could have been a decent Bruce Banner, but the movie was made like
Yeah.
shit. The 2008 Hulk with Edward Norton wasn't the worst movie except for that Edward Norton was fucking awful.
Yeah, it was rough. They also wanted him to play Patrick Bateman in American Psycho.
No.
I know. And he played guitar with Courtney Love's band Hole in two different gigs in 1998.
Good for him.
And also apparently later came out and had a lot of strong feelings about the documentary made that blamed Courtney Love for oh my God.
Kurt Cobain.
Kurt Cobain. I was like, where did his name go? Kurt Cobain's death.
Yeah, but I still think she did it.
I mean, I do too, but
I also don't like it. I'll be honest, I don't like Edward Norton. Like as a person, as an actor, I don't like him.
I also don't really. Okay. I also don't really love him as a person. I have mixed feelings about him as an actor because I've seen a couple of things that I didn't hate. And I personally didn't hate him in this, but I think it has a lot more to do with the character than his acting, the character arc they chose in this one as opposed to his acting.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's kind of the next step. So we now have three Will Grahams. We have Edward Norton, we have Gil Grissom,
Yeah.
who does have a name, William Peterson,
Yep.
and Hugh Dancy, who are all portrayed pretty differently. Because you get William Peterson, who plays the traditional cop role of Will Graham. He feels much more detective-y. He has some of those elements of like the psychological aspects that we see with Will, but for the most part, he feels like he's playing a cop character, which makes sense because he plays a cop character in everything else he's ever done.
Correct.
And then you have Edward Norton, who gets a little bit more of the character arc of the mental issues. You see that he doesn't necessarily always portray it very well because especially like when he's in the hotel room watching the movies and connecting the dots, it's like someone handed him a piece of paper that he's reading all of the connections from his brain.
Yeah.
Of course, Hugh Dancy.
It's his Edward Norton is too stiff for me to believe the mental gymnastics, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Because he has some similar elements that we see in Hugh Dancy's character, where Hugh Dancy is very like stoic and like, but you see him unravel when he unravels, and you see him make those mental leaps that he's got that educated sense, whereas he's not blank. He's stoic,
not blank, whereas Edward Norton seems blank.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts and takes on these three characters, representations, and rank them?
I really think that I probably would have had different feelings about the two movie Will Grahams if I hadn't seen the show. Like if I was watching this in the early 2000s, I had
Yeah.
not seen the show, I would probably have different feelings because I just think that Hugh Dancy does such a phenomenal job of the onion peeling that
Mhm.
exists. But we also are seeing a younger, less burnt out, still in the thick of it, Will Graham with Hugh Dancy. We're
Well, the
not
thing is, they're all the same age. They're all 33 at this point.
no, but I mean in terms of where they are in the character arc, like
Oh,
we're not
yeah.
looking at a post Hannibal Will Graham in the
Right,
TV
right, right.
show. So it's a different level of like unhinged. Because the other
Mhm.
two we're watching who they are after.
After.
I
Mhm.
will say I don't believe that Will Peterson's Will Graham could have understood Hannibal. I don't see them connecting.
Yeah.
I do not believe him as the same level of like unraveled camaraderie. So that would be my least favorite. He is much more an old school detective. He is much more of a like mystery novel detective. So
Mhm.
maybe he's the better representation of the character from the book. Like for me though, I just don't believe that Hannibal trusted him. Like he does not appear to me as the kind of person Hannibal trusts.
Yeah.
Um, and then like I said, I think Edward Norton is not a good actor. And I don't think that he portrays the struggle as well. And like, this is awful, but I didn't believe he cared when his wife was getting kidnapped.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of a big fucking deal.
Right. Because he's so blank. And I agree. And that's kind of my hang up as well, is because like I think the way that they portrayed this character was better done in Red Dragon, but Edward Norton didn't do it.
Yes,
And I
the
think
acting, the writing of the
Mhm.
character storyline and part of that is because they showed the capture and they showed
Yeah.
the free, which they didn't in the other one. So like
Right.
the writing set up a better connection to the character. However, the acting wasn't enough for me to care.
Right.
Um,
But I 100% agree with you that William Peterson was not the correct choice because he feels like he should play Jack Crawford. He doesn't feel like he should be playing Will Graham.
right.
And that's okay. But
Yeah,
that's
no, and
also
it's
the
okay.
truth.
But like I said,
Um,
it's also a different era, a different time, a different kind of
yeah.
detective film. So like I'm not
Yeah.
mad about it. It's just not what I want.
Right. And so I obviously I go Hugh Dancy if we're picking acting, Will Peterson over Edward Norton. If we're going character, I'm picking Edward Norton's over Will Peterson, but I think Hugh Dancy definitely has like knocked it out of the park. Um,
Correct.
best one for sure. So our next character comparison, which fun fact, if you look at Manhunter, William Peterson is ranked higher in the like list of characters, whereas when you go to Red Dragon, Anthony Hopkins is ranked higher.
Well, yeah, because at this point, there's
Yeah,
already been two Hannibal movies, and Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter is
yeah.
the draw.
Well, I also think it shows one of the main differences in these movies is that this movie is focused, Manhunter is focused more on Will Graham. Whereas you see Red Dragon focused on Will Graham, but there's a lot more Hannibal in this one. It's
There's
a lot more focus than there is in Manhunter.
significantly more. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it while they're the same movie with the same storylines, with a lot of the same scenes, there's such a like focus shift. And it is because everyone knows Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah.
But it just I feel like that also kind of makes the movie a little bit different on the outset. So in Manhunter, we have Brian Cox, who is known for Succession, X2, and Troy. So we see a lot of him. He is the first actor to portray Hannibal, and he based him on Peter Manuel, who is a serial killer from the UK.
Okay.
I did look up what he did, and I forgot what it was because that was 2 weeks ago, and I looked it up, and I'm just now remembering that.
Cool.
He has him and Anthony Hopkins have a lot of crossovers. they both also played Titus Andronicus and King Lear. And it's funny because they were each playing King Lear while the other was portraying Hannibal. So it's kind of
Oh,
like they
that's
swapped
kind of
roles at the
cool.
same
That's kind of
time,
cool.
which was
Um,
really funny.
yeah, Peter Manuel killed 7 or more people in Scotland, and had the nickname the Beast of Birkinshaw. He
Oh
was
yeah.
he was
Hmm.
the second to last person to ever be hung on the gallows in Glasgow.
Um, I do remember him now. So fun fact, kind of related to Brian Cox, there's a lot of tie over with the Marvel universe. Obviously not directly, but there's just a lot throughout the movies. Um, so he was the first person to play Hannibal Lecter. He was also the first of all three Hannibals to appear in a film based on a Marvel comic. However, they each have had their places because obviously Hopkins played Thor's dad. Um,
Odin, yeah,
and
and Mads
yeah,
Mikkelsen is Caecilius.
right. And Magneto's escape in X2 was actually modeled after Lecter's escape in Silence of the Lambs. Um, and then during the film where Anthony Hopkins plays Odin,
Mhm.
Loki plays a scene opposite Black Widow in which he's trapped behind glass that is meant to be similar to Lecter and Clarice.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, and then Mads Mikkelsen wears a face mask resembling Lecter's in Doctor Strange. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of like random overlap between the two. So that is Brian Cox. And then we have our other Hannibal, who is Anthony Hopkins, obviously.
Sir,
Fun
yeah,
fact,
Sir
Sir
Anthony
Anthony
Hopkins.
Hopkins, because even though he gained US citizenship, he did keep his knighted title from
Yes.
the UK. His birthday is actually Halloween. Fun fact.
Love that.
Um, and he's known for, of course, Silence of the Lambs, The World's Fastest Indian, Nixon, and Hitchcock, because he has portrayed so many random people
Mhm.
that are like historical characters.
Mhm.
Um, he likes to be called Tony, which
Yes.
is just interesting. I didn't know that.
I,
Um, he turned down the Alfred Pennyworth role in Batman Begins.
which
He,
honestly,
which
kind of
is
glad
fine.
because Michael Caine was phenomenal in those movies.
I think it's phenomenal everything.
That's
I
true.
love Michael Caine. Um, he is the oldest person to win an acting Oscar.
Mhm.
It was for The Father in 2020.
Mhm.
Um,
Yes, I remember that.
he is great at being a mime, and he was intending to be like a classical pianist as his profession. So he's also very good at piano.
Love that.
Um, and last but certainly not least, and I may have said this before, but he came out after Hannibal and Red Dragon and said that it was a mistake for him to star in either of those movies. And he just said Silence of the Lambs was okay. So this is his biggest role that people know him for, but not necessarily his favorite.
Yeah.
So that's fine. So now what do we think of our this one I feel like is a little bit of a harder comparison because we have such
Mm,
good actors in all of these
yeah.
roles. Hannibal.
Um, this is a controversial opinion, and I know it is, and
Okay.
I've had it for a long time. I don't particularly like Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter.
Okay.
Listen, he's a phenomenal actor.
Hmm.
The level of creep that he is in Silence of the Lambs is iconic. And I do believe in Silence of the Lambs that having been in prison for as long as he was, the creep would come out more.
Right.
However, I do not find him charming, and I don't believe that Hannibal could have accomplished the things that he accomplished without being charming. Even in the scene at the beginning where we see the pre-capture, that ponytail ruined my life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, I it's hard because I don't think he's acting it poorly. I just don't think it's what I think Hannibal Lecter should be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's something about the way Mads Mikkelsen does it where he is smooth as shit and you almost understand why women want to date him. And then you also feel your skin crawl when he turns his head. Like, you know what I mean? And it's just, there's just something that I don't believe about the charm of Anthony Hopkins' version of Hannibal, which is why I think Silence of the Lambs is really the only good film of the ones he's done. That being said, I think he gets Hannibal.
Yeah.
Like he gets it. He gets the superiority and the fun aspects of it. Like the taunting Will Graham parts of it. So good. So my personal opinion is that I would put Mads Mikkelsen as number one just because of how I envision the character. But in terms of the actual performance, it's hard to deny that Anthony Hopkins is amazing. Now, Brian Cox is not bad by any means, but because he has the least amount of meat of Hannibal, he's only done the one film, and that one film was much more focused on Will Graham than it was on Hannibal. It's really hard to compare him to the other two.
Yeah.
So he would be my bottom, not because he did a bad job, just because there isn't the breadth of work to compare it to.
Yeah, I think I agree. And one of the things with like Brian Cox, had he had more screen time, I still don't know that he would have been a different Hannibal than all of them, because you watch him in something like Succession. It's probably the thing I've seen him in most recently. And he has that like evil element to him.
Right.
But I haven't been able to find the charm, like you talked about with Hopkins too, but the charm, or I don't think he has the right means to like taunt and be charismatic at all. I think he just has that like more stoic, more I'm always in charge, and here is like, but then you see the evil underneath that too. And I think he does a good job with stuff like that. I don't think he can fully grasp the character of what Hannibal is supposed to be like. And it's harder for him being the first one, being the first one based off of a book. And at this point, I don't know what books had come out, but I know like Red Dragon, obviously this was the first one. It was in the 80s, so you're also working with less information already. And so I don't think he did terrible, but I don't think he portrays Hannibal as is. I also do agree with what you're saying about Hannibal with Hopkins.
Yeah.
And it is very much a difference of how you visualize Hannibal.
Yeah.
Do you visualize Hannibal as this suave character of Mads Mikkelsen that looks like he could have friends? And granted, we're seeing pre-capture, post-capture with Mads Mikkelsen and Hopkins. So it's possible that, which I know Mads Mikkelsen came out and said he doesn't want to play it like Hopkins because no one can do like Hopkins. You have to do a different character. Right. So it makes sense they're very different. But had he started post-capture, would we have seen as much charm as we see now? Like,
it's a very subjective answer. I think both of them play phenomenal characters. It's just which version of that character do you like is the character for you?
Right. And I think I fall into the same lines as you do, just because I like the psychological aspect that you get with Mads Mikkelsen, because you have the charm. You meet him on the street, you're not scared of him. You meet Anthony Hopkins on the street, you're probably a little nervous. Like, I think it's so different. And I don't know that Mads Mikkelsen is playing Hannibal the way he was written, because he has these dancey elements. Because he's a dancer, he has all these different things that he brought because of who he is as a person, right? That he adds into Hannibal, which I think makes him a more fulfilled character. I think it does make it better. I think Hopkins is probably a little truer to what Thomas Harris wanted.
I think so too. I do think that's probably true, especially with knowing how well Anthony Hopkins and Thomas Harris worked together on the movies and everything. That makes sense to me. But for me, I think the scarier thing is someone that I could literally sit with and have dinner alone with a glass of wine at a table and trust them. Right. That is scarier to me than someone that has that edge that Anthony Hopkins has about him.
Yeah. And I think like we'll never know if Anthony Hopkins could have portrayed that way. I think from seeing everything he's done, it would be harder for him to get that suave element.
Actually, I want to look, I want to look at some of the stuff that he did when he was younger. Because obviously we picture Anthony Hopkins as an older man.
Right.
And not to say that Mads Mikkelsen is young per se, but he has an air of youth that Anthony Hopkins doesn't.
Does not, yeah.
So let me look at. Okay. I don't know that I've seen any of the things that he's done before.
I don't think I've seen anything he's done not as like an adult, how we picture him like.
Right. Like I was just looking at his performances and like I don't think like film, television. So the one I haven't seen this, but I know of it in 1970, he played Charles Dickens in a film about Charles Dickens, like a TV movie about Charles Dickens. And one thing that you should know about Charles Dickens is that he was insane. Like, he was not a suave young man. Like, he was a hot mess and a half. That's why none of his books have happy endings, because he was miserable and drunk and like hated everyone. He literally hated his wife, wished that he had married her sister, and then bullied all of his children. Like, he was not a good person.
Yeah. Right. He wasn't great.
And to be fair, you can go into the psychological aspects of his upbringing and why he wasn't a good person and whatever. But like, he wasn't kind or warm or fuzzy or charming. And if Anthony Hopkins, even as a young man, that's the kind of character he was playing, I don't see him ever having the suave element that Mads Mikkelsen has.
Yeah, I think that's entirely fair. And probably true. I mean, that's why he was cast in Silence of the Lambs, because he had this like slightly deranged always being. Yeah. And to be pre-capture, you have to have a little less deranged, because how else have you made it so far?
Right. How did you not get caught if you were deranged?
Right. So yeah. So I think that's fair. I do like Mads Mikkelsen, and I think we're a little biased, whether we're meant to be or not, but I agree he does a little bit better of the psychological elements that you see more depth, I guess, and more variety in his performance, where you really only see Hopkins and Brian Cox one way. So the last one I want to talk about is the character of the Tooth Fairy, Frances Dollarhide. And so we obviously have two bigger characters who are cast members who are playing here. So in Manhunter, we have Tom Noonan, who's known for Schenectady. It's Synecdoche, New York. It is not Schenectady, but it's spelled weird also. Synecdoche. Okay, New York. RoboCop 2 and The House of the Devil. And so you're getting some of that like traditional horror element, but you also get some more comedic elements with him. Whereas our alternative being in Red Dragon is Ralph Fiennes, who is known for The Constant Garden, The Grand Budapest Hotel, Schindler's List, and the 1998 Avengers, and also Harry Potter. But that was not listed on his top 4 known for.
Right.
And so we know obviously a little bit more about him. I don't have a lot of fun facts about Tom Noonan, but Ralph Fiennes, he filmed his role as Lord Voldemort in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire in only 2 days, which feels crazy.
Yeah, but I mean, the Goblet of Fire, it was just that last scene.
Yeah. of the roughly 1 dozen actors to play Hamlet on Broadway, he was the first one to win a Tony for doing so in 95.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so those are my real facts about him.
Also,
But
sorry. And also, his name is pronounced Rafe. It is spelled Ralph.
oh, it is Rafe. I
Yeah.
read that today too, and completely
Yeah.
forgot. It's Rafe Fiennes because
Yeah.
it rhymes with safe signs. That's what his trivia says on IMDb. I
I'm
was like, okay.
deceased. My problem with Rafe in this role is probably 0% about his acting. I thought he did a phenomenal job.
Yeah.
Especially because they took the character to a much more unhinged level in that movie than they did in the other one. My problem is that a character whose murder spree is based in the fact that they are deformed and unloved can't be that attractive. Like, he had the scar from the soft palate surgery. That was the only abnormality on his face. What they did to Tom Noonan with the makeup and the way that he looked made it believable. I didn't believe for a second that Ray Fiennes couldn't get a girl to love him.
Yeah. No,
they took the grandma aspect and the Red Dragon aspect way deeper and farther. So eventually you find out that like his trauma isn't just that he's ugly.
Yeah.
But like they didn't change the way the murder was solved. So the theory was still that it was because he was ugly.
Right. Yeah, and I agree.
But he wasn't ugly. Like,
but you also see that in a lot of films around this time.
I fucking hate it.
It's such a bad trope.
Because listen, I'm not saying there are plenty of actors who it's hard to call them ugly because they're not ugly, but they're not conventionally attractive. Right. Rafe Fiennes is conventionally attractive.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like if you look at like Tom Noonan, have you looked him up like as a person?
No, actually I haven't.
I mean he's you recognize him. This is Tom Noonan.
Oh, yeah. No,
so like he's not
conventionally attractive. Yeah, he's not unattractive, but he's not conventionally attractive. Like he's not going to be in people's Hot 100.
Right. And he, has a lot of horror scenes he does and different stuff, whereas obviously Ray Fiennes does Voldemort. But even then he's very like shaped and sculpted. Like he's not.
Voldemort is only ugly because he doesn't have a nose.
Right. But Tom Noonan, he also has so one of the elements that I think that added a lot of creep to this, which is the thing he's like known for this film, is he avoided the entire cast until he like had a scene with them pretty much. And so he would not come to set because he wanted to have the suspense factor, but he would secretly come to set and like spy on the different scenes and the different characters and the different cast members. But they never knew it until the end, basically. And that's how he developed his character. And I feel like you really see that in Manhunter because all he does is skulk around the whole time. And even when he meets, like Reba, and like he's even skulking then, and she's blind. He doesn't have to, like, and it doesn't matter where he goes. And you feel that element with him. Whereas when you're watching Ray Fiennes' character, who is a phenomenal actor, don't get me wrong, he doesn't have some of those traditional creepy elements that you'd expect. And part of that, I'm sure, has to do with conventional attractiveness. It has to do that he is more personable on the screen.
Right. And it wasn't until he had the breakdown after when he was like talking to his dead grandma in his head / the dragon or whatever that you were like, oh, this guy's fucked up. The first time you saw Tom Noonan's Mr. D, you were like, oh, he's kind of weird. Like,
yeah. Which is what you want for a character like this in particular. You want to never have that like full like ease with them.
Because no one else did either. Like if you look at the way
Yeah.
that the movies went, the way that the story goes, when they start trying to figure out who it is, everybody's like, "Oh, that kind of I can see it."
Yeah.
Like no one doubted it.
Right. So that is the big storyline for Red Dragon. That is the Tooth Fairy, Francis Dollarhide. It is a little bit of a overused trope now of the kid who's abused by his mom and becoming this crazy killer.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. So if we were to get this storyline in like a Hannibal, um, who do you think would be the best to portray this character with the cast we have? I need to look up his name. I know who I think, but I need to look up his name. Because God knows I don't write things down.
Oh, man, I wish that I had known this question was coming. Because
I didn't think about it till 20 minutes ago. So
okay, cool. Um, huh. I
where's my guy? Ugh. So
um
I'll tell you now that I've looked him up,
yeah.
who I would like to play him. I think Dennis O'Hare could play a good character of Tooth Fairy.
Dennis O'Hare.
He plays the Burnt Man in Murder House. He does theater
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's
because he has a similar look to Tom Noonan. First of all, they
mhm.
have a lot of the same features and a lot of the same characteristics. They play similar type roles, and we've seen him play. I feel like Larry's kind of a similar character,
Yeah, I
the
can
burnt guy
see
from
that.
Murder House.
Yeah.
And so I think he would be an excellent choice to play the Tooth Fairy um, in our show.
I could see that. This is really I Googled ugly actors just to see what they said.
Just to see who they've picked.
Yeah. Most of the ones that they're showing me are too old.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, maybe DJ Qualls. This guy.
okay.
He does creepy okay too. Um,
Yeah.
and he does a lot of comedy, but he played creepy in something. I don't know what it was.
Um,
Maybe it was Supernatural that I saw him in recently. Um,
um, no, no. My Weirdly, my first gut answer was somebody that we have talked about as being ugly on this podcast quite a few times. And it is the guy who's married to Kristen Dunst, but I never remember his name.
See, he would play Freddie Lounds if Freddie was a man still,
Yes.
because he has
Yes.
so many similarities to Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Yes. No, that would be
Mhm.
but my first thing of
Yeah,
who always makes me uncomfortable, no matter what they're doing, was who I
that
thought.
is true.
But he definitely would be Freddie. Um
And it's okay
uh,
if you can't think of one.
no,
I did give two suggestions.
yeah, you did. I'm gonna keep
Okay, thinking it
brainstorming.
over.
Yeah.
Um, so do you think that we're gonna, because we don't know where we're going with season three, um, obviously. Do we think we're gonna get this storyline or leading into this storyline, or do you think we're gonna completely ignore Red Dragon and Manhunter? And because we've had some elements, obviously, we have where Freddie Lounds is burned in the chair. So we've already gotten some pieces. Do you think we're just gonna have homages, or do you think we're gonna end up getting like the Tooth Fairy?
I I don't know if we're gonna do that. I think that it's gonna be really hard to do anything that's too close to the books. Um, because I don't know how if we're ever gonna get to the point where we actually capture Hannibal. Because
Right.
I know that I know that like that everyone involved with the show has said that it could come back. So like what does
Right.
that mean?
Well, I mean, you think about it could come back, and we talked about this a little bit in the wrap up, that it could come back and we could see Silence of the Lambs. We could see other storylines that are similar if they have rights to Clarice. We could, so those things could come into play even if he is captured. Or we could leave it open to where he's not captured and we're still running with a storyline of something else that's flipped with him. So
I figured it out. It's also somebody who I wouldn't necessarily call unattractive, but I think they can do it. Robert Carlyle.
Robert Carlyle.
He played Rumpelstiltskin in Once Upon a Time.
Oh, is he a little bit too old though?
He might be. He might be. He was born in 1961. So he's like early 60s. So he might be a little old, but I don't know how old the other guys that we were talking about are either.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they were
Dennis O'Hare was born in 1962.
He just can play that character so well.
I know, but so I'm saying like Robert Carlyle is not any different. It's the same age thing, as Dennis O'Hare. So like,
and you can do a lot with makeup on both of them. We've seen both of
them do really interesting makeup work. So
yeah. So one of the biggest differences between the two films is going to be, it's a director's choice, is that Manhunter skips the apparent suicide of Francis Dollarhide and just has him being captured. And so when we go into Red Dragon, we have that whole drawn out bit at the end where which that part is from the book, that he says he commits suicide, but he actually shoots the other guy that's interested in Reba and then goes and captures the son. What kind of effect do you think that has? And do you have one way that you prefer?
I don't know, because I think both movies were too long.
They were the same length and they were both too long, correct?
But so at least in the drawn out ending, there's almost a reason for it to be 2 hours long. In the in the movie that was over 2 hours long that didn't draw any of the plot points out, it was very confusing to me how we got there.
Yeah.
I think I liked him just dying or getting captured part and skipping the suicide part, because maybe, okay, this is a criticism of the acting or the direction choices on how the actors handle the characters, because if the suicide came straight from the book, what I don't comprehend is Ralph Fiennes' version of Dollarhide wanted to die. Like, by the time this happened and he was so upset and he didn't want to hurt Reba and he didn't want to be this person anymore, he wanted to die. So why would he fake death just to continue doing bad things? That doesn't seem congruent to me, which means that if that's where the plot was supposed to go, you chose to portray the character's emotional arc at the wrong time. So I didn't believe it as much as the subjecting themselves to capture version, which means, but if the suicide version is what the book said, what that means is that the director didn't make the right choice.
Yeah, there have been a lot of comments on the director's choices, both directors, not just one of them. Okay. And I think I like the idea of having the suicide because it makes the scene where Hannibal Lecter gives the address to Francis Dollarhide not necessary. Like, because it's like, why do we have that scene if he's not going to his house? Didn't
they still have him go after the girls? They just did it in a weird order.
They did, but it wasn't as effective because I don't think it was as effective because they thought he was dead. At this point, they already kind of knew. They figured it out kind of as he was planning to go over there. No, I agree. I don't think it has the emotional aspect.
Oh, I agree that the emotional aspect was stronger in the other one, but they didn't completely disregard him having the address. Right. They just didn't do it as well.
Yeah. And so it feels a little, because he also like had him try to go over in the beginning, like in the second film in Red Dragon. And so like there was a lot more overlap and there was a lot more reason for Hannibal to be in the film, which again, we know that that was part of the director's choice as well. They wanted more Hannibal in the film.
Yeah.
With that storyline than without. And I think I like it because it's a little bit of a twist. I don't think it's a
I didn't hate it.
twist.
Like, no, I didn't hate it. And I will say
Yeah.
the scene where Edward Norton makes the on-the-fly decision to start bullying his son
Yeah.
the same way that Dollarhide had been bullied to upset him enough to get him to get rid of his son, like to drop the son. That was probably the only acting choice I believed of Edward Norton's in the whole movie.
That was the best scene in the film, other than when Rafe Fiennes had his breakdown after
Yes.
sleeping with Reba. Those were the two scenes
Those were the two
really,
scenes that were
get you
like genuinely emotionally good. So I
Yeah.
don't hate that they did it that way. I just don't believe that the character from Rafe Fiennes' breakdown scene would do the things that that character from
Yeah.
the Edward Norton scene did. Like they just don't flow together.
And that's fair, because also the way that Rafe Fiennes was performed, was shown, was to be a little more emotionally. I mean, he was very emotionally distraught, but you cared about him a little bit more than you cared about Tom Noonan's character. Like, I didn't like. Of course, I had the like, oh, he was abused as a child. That really sucks. But like, I didn't feel as bad for him as I did for Rafe Fiennes.
Yeah, I never felt
that
bad
also.
for him. I never felt that
because
for him. I
you
just wanted
see
them
him
to catch him.
Right. You see Rafe Fiennes is a little more human. And so having that kind of scene, if they were going to include or not include the scene, it feels like it should have been the opposite. It feels like Tom Noonan should have been the one to pretend like he committed suicide and then go on to try and kill more people. Yep. Whereas Rafe Fiennes, like you said, felt like he was already ready to die. And
yeah.
So why would you not in there?
Agreed.
So also we have the effect of what does that say? I asked that already. Okay. So the effect of having it in the 80s versus the 2000s. So we get our 80s cop film, detective film, and then we have our 2000s drama thriller. And these are, while being the exact same storyline, very differently done. You also have different directors. Like the 80s has Michael Mann, who's known for The Insider, Collateral, The Last of the Mohicans, and Thief. His most recent thing was Ford versus Ferrari, which is totally different from any of those movies. But those are the things he's known for. Whereas we have Brett Ratner, who is the first thing he's known for is Red Dragon, and then X-Men, The Last Stand, the 2014 Hercules, and Rush Hour. So we're coming from completely different like backgrounds to do the same movie in different decades. And I had a hard time getting past the 80s element of Manhunter.
Me too.
Which is why I found that I was more like I watched Red Dragon one time and I know what happened. I watched Manhunter 2 times and I only kind of know what happened. Yeah. And so what do you think?
The 80s element of Manhunter was difficult. There were a couple times that I literally watched the scene and I go, that's a choice. However, I don't know. I don't really care for either of them.
Yeah. I agree. I liked Red Dragon better to sit through and watch. However, had we taken Michael Mann and put him in 2002, I think that would have been a better version, because he had the traditional horror elements. You have the use of lighting. You have the creation of the character that's not likable, along with the character that's theoretically supposed to be a little more charismatic. Yeah. And he just had less to work with being in the 80s as opposed to the 2000s. Yeah. But I think he understood the story better. I agree. Than Brett Ratner. I also have found out that a lot of people are really against the Brett Ratner because he has sexually assaulted a lot of people. So we don't like him already. Cool. But it makes me feel better about saying I think Michael Mann would have made a better movie in 2002 anyways,
Yeah.
because I think the direction in Red Dragon was pretty terrible already. It was just a more modern film, so it was a little bit easier to watch. And it had people in it that were good. It's not like, obviously we had Ray Fiennes, we had Anthony Hopkins, and the girl who played Reba, I really liked her. Like, there are plenty of good actors in this film, but I don't think the direction was there. And I feel it was also lacking in the 80s, but I think that had a lot more to do with the 80s than with Michael Mann, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I agree. No, I agree. Because there was really, I will say, the scene where the Tooth Fairy actually attacked at Reva's house. That was the first time that I was like, whoa, holy 80s visuals.
Right. I mean, I thought it from the second we were doing Baywatch when we introduced Will Peterson.
Yes. But like, that was the first time that was the first moment that I was like, I cannot forgive the 80s for this one.
Right. Yeah, it was, my God, it was rough. So we're coming up on the end. So I do have some fun facts for you about each of the movies.
Perfect.
Before we make our final determination of which one's overall better.
Okay.
So Manhunter, I'm gonna start with Manhunter fun facts.
Okay.
This film was made in the 80s before terms like profiler and even serial killer were truly part of the societal vocabulary. Because if you think about it, it was late 70s, early 80s when we really first started talking about serial killers in general.
Yeah.
Much less that the name was used.
Right.
And so it's kind of funny to look back on that and be like, oh, we're like in the beginning of people dealing with serial killers.
Yeah.
Which is very different from 2002. There were so many people that were thought about to be playing all of these roles. Three of my least favorite options.
Oh boy.
For Will Graham. Gene Wilder.
Absolutely not.
John Goodman.
Absolutely not.
And Robin Williams were all considered to play the role of Will Graham.
John Goodman, I can at least understand why that was a thought. I don't agree with it.
He has a similar characteristic to like a William Peterson.
Right. Like I personally don't think it would have been the best fit, but I at least can see it. And I've seen John Goodman do some really good dramatic roles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The other two.
Absolutely not.
Fucking choices.
Yeah, it's choices, that's for sure. The Chinese character carved into the tree doesn't mean red dragon, even though they keep saying that. It means middle. The term dragon tile is a Western convention that was introduced by Joseph Park Babcock in the 1920 book Introducing Mahjong to America.
Correct.
So I thought that one might be one that you knew, but yeah. I did not.
I mean, when people play Mahjong in Western society, that is the red dragon tile. Like, that's what it is. But yeah,
but it's not traditionally
the Chinese character doesn't mean red dragon. No.
Yeah. So I talked about Tom Noonan avoiding the cast. So the big tattoo we see in Ray Fiennes took 8 hours to apply. That same tattoo was meant to also be on Tom Noonan, and he spent also many hours getting in makeup for these fake tattoos, and then they were never used in Manhunter.
Oh.
So he just spent a lot of hours getting artwork done that never happened. This is the only film where the name is spelled Lecktor. The rest of them don't include the K.
No.
I don't know why they've done this. There was no reason. It just is what it is. The flight scenes that were filmed where Will Peterson is flying back and forth were twilight flights from Chicago to Florida because production could not get permission to use a commercial flight or to use an airplane to film these scenes. And so instead, they just bought all of the tickets on a plane. And then when they were too high up to do anything, they pulled out their cameras and filmed and pissed everyone off. Like, the pilots were mad. Like everyone was so mad, flight attendants. And that's how they got all those scenes.
Honestly, so epic.
That is my favorite thing. And the name, the reason they went with Manhunter instead of Red Dragon, because obviously the rest of the films all have the names from the books, is because the year it came out, and so the year before it came out in 1985 was the year that Year of the Dragon came out, and it was such a flop that they didn't want to have dragon in the name so that people wouldn't like compare it to the other movie. And then some potential Hannibals for this movie were Brian Dennehy, Bruce Dern, John Lithgow, and Mandy Patinkin. And I think also Mandy Patinkin has too much of a cop leadery role to really be like a Hannibal, but worse suggestions have been made.
And really, the John Lithgow is the one that I'm like not sure how I feel.
I don't think I hate it. John Lithgow's got like range, and he's played a lot of different things. I mean, I know it's mostly been comedy that we've seen with him. I'm trying to see if he's like actually been in.
Well, he in as Winston Churchill, he was.
Yeah. Well, he's done a lot of political ones too.
Yeah.
But like as far as like true horror goes, I don't know that he's done that.
No, I don't think so.
So that would be my only hang up. However, if you're gonna pull someone in from out of genre, I don't think he's the worst option.
Well, no, and I'm also just like, I was trying to figure out what he looked like, so I'm looking at pictures of him from the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
And it wouldn't have been the worst thing. I don't think it would have been the correct thing, but it wouldn't have been the worst thing.
Yeah. That's kind of how I feel. So Brian Cox was fine for this one. It was the first one. They had to use someone, and he wasn't a terrible choice.
Right.
So now my trivia for you for Red Dragon. The Leeds house, which was one of the women who was killed, was previously on Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Also, during filming, Michael Jackson made a surprise visit to set. Because apparently he and Brett Ratner had known each other since Ratner had done music videos.
Oh, okay.
So he just randomly appeared. Over Edward Norton, the first choice to play Will Graham was Ethan Hawke, which makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
They also considered Matt Damon and Jeremy Renner. I think Ethan Hawke is the only one I would have really liked.
I would be very interested in what Jeremy Renner could do with that.
He's such a wild card when he acts. That
that's the thing is I never know what to expect from him. I think Matt Damon would have been a terrible choice.
For sure. The worst of the three.
Yeah, but I wouldn't have hated. Well, it could have turned out terribly, but it also could have turned out amazingly if Jeremy Renner had done it. But at least Jeremy Renner has facial expressions and Edward Norton doesn't, so.
That's true. Probably better than Edward Norton's.
Yeah.
But I do think Ethan Hawke would have been a good choice.
Yeah.
For sure. So Jack Black was considered for the role of Freddy. Thank God it was Philip Seymour Hoffman. I understand Jack Black is capable of doing drama, but I think he would have been too similar to Stephen Lang's version from Manhunter, and I really hated how comedic that actor was played. I think it's one thing to be loosey-goosey and be like, the epitome of what you said, of like, oh, here's your news, everybody come get it. Like, you have that like big personality, but I think doing it a little bit too comedic takes away from the film, especially Manhunter, when we're using such dark and Hitchcock-esque like visuals.
That's fair. That's totally fair.
And so I don't think I would have but I know Jack Black, he played, what was it? The Woman in the Window, or he did The Woman in Black. He was in one of those films, wasn't he? As like a dramatic character.
Woman in the Window, not Woman in Black.
Woman in the Window. But he didn't do terrible, if I recall, but I don't think he would have been the same as Philip Seymour Hoffman.
No.
And then some other people considered for the role of Dollarhide were Sean Penn, which feels strange, and Nicolas Cage.
Oh my God, that would have been amazing.
Can you imagine?
That would have been
He
amazing.
is so strange. He would have been the excellent choice.
Why
Um,
didn't I think of Nicolas Cage when I thought of who could play him now?
I know.
Oh my God.
He's so weird. He's so weird. Um, and last but certainly not least, the death of Freddie Lounds in the wheelchair was filmed by setting a real stuntman on fire as the wheelchair was rolled down the street. There were no puppets or animatronics involved.
I believe it.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
Fire stunts are wild, man.
Yeah, it's so wild. So I found that really crazy. Um, yeah, so that is all of my facts for you. So overall, what were your feelings? If you had to sum up your feelings of these movies, and which one you ultimately think is better, considering all things considered.
My overall thoughts is that I didn't really care for either of the movies, but I did appreciate having seen them because of the elemental homages that were taken from them. Um, I also, um, it was interesting to see Freddie actually played the way Freddie was written. Um,
Yeah.
oh, also Bloom being a man was still weird for me. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
But but so um so I appreciated the way that they influenced the TV show. I appreciated what they did with the books, but I don't think I actually liked either of them. If I had to choose
Yeah.
an overall winner, I think it's hard because I think the acting was for the most part better in Red Dragon.
Mhm.
But I do think that despite the 80s-ness of it, Manhunter was more focused on one story.
Yeah.
Red Dragon had a lot of like the Tooth Fairy's backstory and Hannibal and Will's relationship, and like there was just a lot happening in it and a lot of elements that were unnecessary. Like my least favorite part of that movie was the 7-minute long segment of Will walking through the lead's house and making notes to himself while he looked at all the blood with really graphic blood and terrible horror background music, like when you knew he was investigating a murder scene, as if like something was going to
Yeah.
pop out at him and it was not. Like, so it was attempting artistic qualities that didn't pan out.
Mhm.
And so I think if I had to pick one, I would unfortunately pick Manhunter as the better overall package film.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I think overall Manhunter had a better director. It had better horror visuals. And I think it was done a little bit better. However, picking enjoyment, I just liked watching Red Dragon better, and it
Yeah.
had to do with a lot of the modern elements. It had to do with, some of the modern cast and just like Ray Fiennes taking over the screen the whole time he was there. Like that was really fun. And so I think like personal favorite, I think I would have to go Red Dragon just because I couldn't get past the 80s. However, best is probably Manhunter, and that's what the rest of the
Yeah.
world says too.
I will say I appreciated seeing Dr. Richard Weber as not Dr. Richard Weber as the vet in Red Dragon because I was like, what the fuck? But then literally the next day I
Yeah.
watched an episode of The West Wing that he played the mayor of DC and I was like, seriously, huh? I didn't even know the man
Everywhere.
existed. And now I'm watching
Um,
all of his things.
That is a fun fact that I forgot to write down. In Manhunter, they had a real tiger and a real veterinarian there to oversee everything. So the guy who plays the veterinarian is actually a real veterinarian, not
Oh,
an
that's
actor.
great. In
Mhm.
Red Dragon, that was not true.
That is not the case.
I don't know if it
Correct.
was
Yeah.
a real tiger, but it was for sure not a real
For
veterinarian.
sure not a real veterinarian. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. So that is our discussion of Manhunter slash Red Dragon. So next week we will be back to our regularly scheduled content. We'll be starting season 3 of Hannibal, the current last season. We'll see if that's forever, but currently it is the last season. And I'm excited. Any final thoughts before we go?
No, I think I said it all. It's a weird movie, man.
Um, Weird movies. Well, if you have any thoughts, feelings, etc., feel free to email us, deathandaliens@gmail.com. Find us on all of the social media at Death and Aliens. You can find me at CECloud13.
And you can follow me everywhere at EMKAY_superstar.
And we'll see you on Sunday.
Bye.